All eyes were on me as I stepped cautiously into the diplomatic lounge, suddenly hyper-aware of my surroundings like a deer sensing itself being stalked. A few of the council members' faces noticeably lit up at the sight of me, a reminder, as though I needed one, of how they viewed me more as a cute animal than a person. "Why, hello there!" Estriel smiled, waving me forth casually with her left hand as I stepped toward the holographic screen. "You must be the human!" Poisonous affection dripped from her voice with each word, reminding me potently of how Zymera spoke. "That I am," I replied through gritted teeth, biting back my urge to rain rhetorical hellfire upon this tyrannical tribunal. The fact that they were considering humanity's plight was a good start at the very least. Now all I had to do was get them to extend the same courtesy to the Kafel. Upon confirmation of my identity, the Irigan male who had spoken earlier visibly bit back a laugh as he looked me over with mirth in his eyes. "Seriously, Zymera? You truly think this child should be entrusted with the fate of a civilization?" "He may appear rather young," Zymera conceded, tossing the man an almost protective glare. "But I will assure you that Andrew is very much more than a child. He is a mature member of his species and was able to pass the stewardship test I gave him. You all saw the results." Several stares, the meanings of which I could not decipher, were cast between the council members as they debated vigorously amongst themselves whether or not to even let me speak. Their bout of disagreement, however, turned out to be a blessing in disguise, as it allowed me a few minutes to formulate a proper argument against the Irrigan's imperialism. For once, I would not be beginning a verbal engagement already on the back foot. There would be no extraneous circumstances to prevent my point from coming across. And so, when finally the council's attention returned to me, I was ready. "Tell us then, Andrew of Earth," the stern-looking male began with an aloof smirk. "Why should we even be considering allowing a less advanced species like yours to roam freely? After all, for every second we spend here deliberating, more lives could very well be lost. Don't you think it would be better for you to just sit back and let us help your civilization?" Clearing my throat and staring up in defiance against the lot of them, I replied, "Let me answer your question with one of my own. Why is it that you need to conquer a civilization to help them in the first place?" I asked semi-rhetorically. "What a stupid question! You've seen the atrocities civilizations like your own are capable of," spat another of the council members, this one visibly shorter than the rest. "Would you propose we do nothing in the face of their oppression? The problem with your methods is that you present a false dichotomy between total non-intervention and absolute takeover," I hissed, brushing aside their attempts to counter the notion as I continued regardless. "When I was placed within that simulation, you gave me only two options. Problems as complex as this aren't just some binary thing. You can intervene without invading." Hearty laughter resounded from another of the council members upon my argument. When he spoke for the first time in this meeting, the depth of his voice nearly caused me to jump. "You act as though we have not tried that before," he boomed dismissively, regarding the concept a look of genuine bafflement. "Do you really think our civilization's first instinct when seeing other species suffering was unanimous integration? No, the only reason we do this is because it's the only way to truly negate suffering." "Really?" I asked him, continuing before he could answer in the affirmative. "Because the way I see it, your methods actually cause as much suffering as they prevent. It's one thing to intervene on the behalf of those victimized by their own people, but your methods take it too far." "And you think you could do better, do you?" Estriel asked, her expression one of amusement more so than genuine consideration, like someone listening to the fanciful stories of a child. "Let me show you. Gamblers have a phrase back on Earth, double or nothing. Give half a year. If I can prove the Kafel are trustworthy with themselves, you have to let both them and humanity free. If I fail, then I'll hand over the coordinates to Earth. Seem fair?" This was an absolutely awful deal to make. I knew there wasn't a snowball's chance in hell I'd succeed in so grand a design within such a short time frame. Still, some part of me insisted that I had to buy time. Most of the council regarded my bargaining attempt with dry amusement, while others seemed almost angry with me. "You have the coordinates, do you?" began the male who first insulted me. "Zima, if he has what we need to begin the integration, why not just do away with this worthless game and take them?" Every second we waste here talking is another second his species remains in danger. Need I remind you all that this is fundamentally my choice? Zemera began, casting a glance back toward me with an almost conflicted look in her eyes. If there truly is a way to ensure freedom and prosperity for all, then we have a moral obligation to seek it out. Either he succeeds and we discover a less intrusive integration method, or he fails and we have proof that our ways are best. Do we not win here regardless? Silent contemplation settled over the room as Zemera's co-workers seemed to consider what she was saying. Eventually, Estriel offered up a sigh of concession as she turned her gaze back toward me. "We support your decision, Zemera," she began begrudgingly, raising her hand to silence the remaining voices of dissent. "Though I feel it needn't be said that last time a Prime Steward refused to properly intervene, the result was 14 extinct species." "I know," murmured Zemera, her eyes downcast in something like grief. "I mourn them each day. Understand that should things come down to it, I will not hesitate to institute normal integration protocols. We would expect no less." The short one grinned, logging off with the press of a holographic button, his leaving followed by a short cascade of similar exits until the chat room was empty save for Zemera. My mind raced with sheer confusion as I contemplated what had just occurred. Zemera, who had previously been so in favor of their conquering ways, had spoken out in my favor. "I don't understand. Why are you all of a sudden advocating for humanity's freedom?" "I don't know," she sighed, refusing to meet my gaze as she paced around the central table. "At first I thought you simply lacked empathy. I thought it was pure selfishness by which you refused to help us. But after seeing you complete the test, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it, and now I'm not so sure." "Now, if you'll excuse me," whispered the Prime Steward, ducking out of the room without so much as another word to me. "Don't tell me you're actually falling for this bullshit." Bouth's voice seethed through real space. Casting my gaze back toward the chat room screen, I saw his digitized face staring back at me. "I feel like this should go without saying, but the Council isn't going to keep their word." "Maybe you're right," I shrugged, speaking quietly so as not to alert Zemera to his presence. "But it's not like I have much of a choice. I can't let humanity embark on a suicide mission for a supremacist computer with a threshold of acceptable casualties higher than my species population." "Who said anything about suicide?" smirked the RI. "I'll have you know my plan is falling perfectly into place. Your failure back at the emergency broadcast station was just another piece of the puzzle, as it were. Could have fucking fooled me. It seems I did. No matter. My spy will inform you of the plan once you're planetside on Arquisa. Trust me, we can still win this." I'll be honest, I sincerely didn't trust the RI. He was clearly manipulating me for his own purposes. To him, humanity was merely a chess piece to be sacrificed in the name of grand design. Much as I wanted to believe there was some way out, I knew I was cornered at this point. Maybe it would have been better for everyone if I'd simply stayed frozen in space for all eternity. At least then, humanity might have had more of a chance to advance and fight back. At least then, the Kafel wouldn't have triggered that monument before they were ready. Hopelessness weighted greatly upon me as I wandered back to my cell and, once inside, closed the door of my own volition. I wanted to be alone. Honestly, I wanted to disappear. I'd set an impossible goal for myself, all to run out the clock for a plan I didn't have. What was I going to do when I failed? What could I even do? Flinging myself onto my cell's bed and tucking my face beneath the covers, I wallowed in the dark oblivion surrounding me. Was my best chance really to place humanity's fate in the hands of a heartless, replicated intelligence like Ba'oth? Or would it be better for everyone if humanity and the Kafel simply capitulated? Was there any way I could achieve my promised goal and prevent myself from coming to this crossroads? Soon enough, amidst the contemplation, my eyelids drifted closed as sleep found me where I laid.
Secretary General Blake Morris perspective. The greatest hoax in history. That was what the papers were calling the message supposedly broadcast from Mr. Malix. Publicly, every nation in the UN decried this radio broadcast as an elaborate prank. Honestly, if I weren't in the position I was, I'd have easily believed that lie. For the world leaders of Earth, Luna, and Mars, however, this was a serious matter. "We've run the scans," began the president of Mars, visibly sweating bullets as he addressed the rest of the council. That's not a good sign. Hopefully he's just not used to Earth's warm weather. Oh, I'm sure you have, U.S. President Martin Huske snarked, regarding the leader of Mars with a contemptuous sneer. Though it had been years since the planetary war in which Mars won its independence, relations with the United States and other Earth nations who lost their colonies remained chilly, to say the least. The Fermi satellite array was an especially sore spot for Americans over $1 trillion tax dollars funneled into a project that would later be stolen from them by rebelling Mars colonists. You're welcome, by the by. Under normal circumstances, this provocation by Huske would likely be met with similar levels of old man sass from President Knoll, almost certainly something mentioning the great oxygen embargo, when the U.S. refused to sell the rebelling colonists new air filters while theirs were failing due to unprecedented difficulties. The president who allowed that was never charged for this war crime, and Mars hasn't quite forgiven the people of Earth for allowing him to get off scot-free. This, however, wasn't normal circumstances, and Knoll's lack of retaliation only heightened my nerves regarding the situation. This signal, it's not from any colony we know of, he began, waiting for those words to properly sink in before continuing. The signal trail just stops in the middle of space. Even stranger, we found evidence of exotic radiation emitting from that same point. Silence. Most of us weren't exactly well-versed in the sciences of space travel and communication. Long as a nation's quantum communication hubs functioned as normal and their fleets stayed functional, there wasn't much reason for bureaucrats to get involved, much as they'd surely like to, the nosy bastards. Even still, most of us understood from Knoll's words that exotic radiation, which sounded like what Godzilla eats during vacation, was not normal. Care to elucidate us as to what that means? I asked. As Secretary General, I wasn't supposed to play favorites, but I'll admit that I liked Knoll a damn sight more than most of the others. If I had to take a stab at guessing why, I'd say it was because he wasn't a politician, but rather a brilliant scientist in his own right. It was his advancements in space combat technology that allowed Mars, Proxima, and Luna to gain their independence. So if whatever this space bullshit was concerned Knoll, it most certainly concerned me too. If I had to guess, the Martian president sighed, casting his gaze around at the other leaders before returning it to me, I'd say it's wormhole tech, sir. Most of us weren't sure what to say to that. If Andrew's message was real and his captors could create wormholes, then that meant we had a truly dangerous civilization on our ass. Our stunned silence, however, was interrupted by laughter of all things from Russian President Annika Morozov. Don't tell me you believe this nonsense, Morris. Clearly the sensor network is suffering from some kind of glitch. We ruled that possibility out already, Knoll replied bluntly, leaving little room for further debate as to whether or not this signal legitimate. Given the threat presented, our best bet was to assume it was real, lest we suffer the consequences of denial. If these Irrigan can create wormholes large enough for ships, then their FTL is likely instantaneous. Our best Alcubierre drives can barely push 60C. I may not be a mathematician, but I knew shit odds when I heard them, and these were probably the shittiest ever to disgrace my table. Anybody got an estimate as to how many ships humanity currently has at our disposal? Last I checked, Knoll replied, visibly crunching the numbers in his head. 100,000 counting civilian vessels. If we went full wartime economy, we could double that within a few months. Given what we're apparently up against, I'm not even sure it'd be worth the waste of energy. Our best bet would be to attempt diplomacy. Somehow, I don't get the feeling our friends are going to be particularly receptive to negotiation, I sighed, rubbing my eyes in exhaustion in an attempt to counteract the hours of sleep lost in the past day. Seems like they're holding all the cards at the moment. If any of you guys have aces up your sleeve, I'd appreciate you going ahead and sharing them with the class. Anxious glances scattered to and fro between leaders, as each one of them seemed to be waiting for another to say something. Nobody here was exactly itching to give away their secrets, even with humanity's future on the line. Finally, after a long stretch of silence, it was President Huske who cleared his speak. As you all may well know, he began, his tone somehow guilty and triumphant at the same time. The Drake Pact states that no country may have in their possession over 1,000 space-worthy vessels for interplanetary combat at one time. Let me guess. The British Prime Minister seethed. You weren't following that little stipulation, were you? I resent that statement. We followed every rule down to the letter. There was, if I recall correctly, no rule against vessels that aren't spaceworthy. We've got a few thousand ships, most of the way built, we could have put together by the end of the month. Same here? Annika sighed, raising her hand in an awkward fashion before the understandably upset leaders who had followed the damn rules like they were supposed to. We have 20,000 shells on standby. I'll tell my people to get them finished. I don't think you all understand, the Martian president growled, his hands moving emphatically to accentuate the words flooding from his mouth. It wouldn't matter if you two had 100,000 extra ships each. To attempt a fight against a civilization of this caliber is suicide. End of story. Nevertheless, I growled, plucking a cigarette from my pocket and lighting up in front of everyone. I was trying to quit, but with bullshit like this going on, I'd say lung cancer would be the least of my worries. We need to be on high alert. I know I'm not really the boss of anyone here, but I'd strongly recommend everyone be prepared to mobilize their fleets at a moment's notice. The meeting ended soon after, with most of us lacking in anything else to say save for prayers. No longer was the question whether or not we were alone in the galaxy. The question was for how much longer would humanity be alone in our own damn solar system. Imbibing a deep breath of tainted air from my stick of burning tobacco, I felt my own body recoil despite me as I picked up the old-fashioned dial phone and scrolled in the number for the ECAPs. I promised myself I'd never hire those bastards. Having gained their ruthless reputation during the planetary war, the ECAPs were a private military group who sold their services to the highest bidder. Technically, because they were not a government, there was no real limit on how many ships they could own. They used this rule to their advantage, making a killing off of killing and hiring lobbyists to ensure the loophole allowing for their business model was never closed. Much as I loathed those cutthroats for their practices, I'll readily admit that it'd be a disservice to humanity if I didn't hire them to help secure the Sol system. Normally, when one shells out for a service, they hope it isn't a massive waste of money. Right now, however, I wanted more than anything for this expense to be extraneous. I hope you've got a damn good plan, Andrew. If you don't, it's curtains for humanity.